What's your favorite part of watching the Flash? Is it the comedy? Maybe you enjoy the action. Me, it's slightly different.
Hello guys, it's Jovan, and you know what time it is? Disco time!
Video is going to be my personal what ifs, where I talk about takes on love interests and why some might be better than others. I'm even going to elaborate on why Iris isn't completely horrible. Park works because she's essentially what the show wanted Iris to be. She's a bold journalist that's principled, driven, and confident in her own identity. And in many ways, she feels more like a comic book version of Iris than CW Iris ever did. Since the show already changed so much about Iris and Barry's dynamic, pairing Barry with Linda could have been, in a way, to preserve the spirit of that iconic relationship, even if the names were different. We've seen in the Arrowverse that they've successfully remixed the comic couples before. Oliver and Felicity weren't even endgame in the comics, yet they worked on screen because of the chemistry and writing focus. There's no reason that the Flash couldn't have done the same, and honestly, if Linda had been given real screen time, I honestly believe that her relationship with Barry could have even rivaled or surpassed Patty and Barry. The chemistry between Linda and Barry is immediate and it's pretty effortless, where Linda is very straightforward and proactive and emotionally mature, which is almost the opposite of Iris during those first seasons. She knows what she wants and she doesn't overcomplicate things or cause unnecessary problems. Where with Barry and Iris, every initial storyline turns into unnecessary drama, miscommunication, and needless emotional stuff. A lot of these issues exist simply because the plot revolves so heavily around Iris. Linda's personality alone would have eliminated many of these conflicts. The relationship feels very playful and natural and pretty charming, that makes you just kind of smile. You know, it's like the kind of chemistry that doesn't really need anything to justify it. If Linda and Barry had been a long-term pairing, I can see less forced arguments and a much more grounded and comic book accurate dynamic. In my mind, it feels closer to Lois Lane and Superman, and while Linda wouldn't be a core member of the Team Flash, that isn't really a downside. Not every important character needs to be in the lab every episode. In fact, keeping Linda outside the team opens up new storylines and possibilities, and avoids the issues that characters being artificially elevated to leadership roles. One of Linda's strongest traits is her emotional maturity. When she realizes that Barry and Iris still had feelings for each other, she doesn't try to make drama or try to compete with Iris. Even though she likes Barry, she has self-respect. She isn't defined by another character's indecision. She makes her own choices and has dignity. That stands in like a stark contrast with Iris during that point. Iris clearly didn't want Barry to move on, and she was in a relationship with Eddie, and she constantly crossed boundaries. Linda, on the other hand, understands herself and respects others. Even with limited screen time, I believe that she had like strong impression. She was definitely my favorite love interest. To talk about a very stable pick, and something that the fan base has wanted for a very long time. Caitlyn Snow is one of the most important characters of Team Flash. From day one, she serves as the team's doctor and scientist, keeping Barry alive more times than anyone can count. Her story is very complicated, and it's honestly one of my biggest regrets, and something that's really upset me without being able to see Caitlyn Snow in the final season of The Flash, especially since she's been there since day one. Really, putting that aside, Caitlyn is one of the strongest romantic options for Barry. The main reason is chemistry. Caitlyn is an original Team Flash member, and her bond with Barry has been built up naturally over the years, and they really trust each other completely and rely on each other for in life or death situation. If this show had explored romantic feelings between them, it wouldn't feel sudden or even out of character. It would have been earned. Caitlyn has also endured the most emotional trauma. She lost Ronnie early on, and that shaped a lot of her character arcs in the earlier seasons. And then, when she kind of recovered, she was manipulated by Zoom while he was pretending to be Hunter Zolomon, further damaging her ability to trust. Despite all this, Caitlyn remains an empathetic, selfless, and deeply committed person. She often helps people at the expense of her own happiness. Another reason that she would work so well with Barry is because Caitlyn constantly puts her work and the team above her own personal life, to a point that she barely has one. Honestly, I can't even remember episodes where Caitlyn is more than the Doctor. The Flash would have been more grounded and emotional, and it would have definitely centered very much around Team Flash and given the characters very meaningful growth. Ultimately, my biggest reason is just because of the chemistry. Grant Gustin and Danielle Hannah Baker had a great connection that constantly outshined Iris. And at the end of the day, Snowberry works not because it's a good ship, not just because it's a good ship.
You're teasing me, naughty, naughty.
To be happy after all that she's been through. This is my opinion on Iris, and it's easily going to be the most controversial part of this video, with what most people agree on already. A lot of the fans dislike Iris, and that isn't without a reason. Much of the frustration comes from how often she creates unnecessary conflict. Early on, when she's dating Eddie, the show implies that she has feelings for Barry, which at that time feels inconsistent at best. If she truly loved Barry, or if she had any feelings at all, it's strange that she showed no interest when he was just an ordinary guy that was clearly in love with her. That makes her later feelings feel retroactive, like the show is rewriting her emotions to fit the endgame. Her personality doesn't really help, especially in the earlier seasons. Iris often comes off as being a rude, entitled, and confrontational individual. That attitude never really fully goes away, and instead of being meaningfully addressed, it's usually justified by the narrative and her trauma. It kind of feels like they're portraying her as a victim, when in reality she gets it off easier than everyone else. Things get worse when she learns that Barry is the Flash. Her love for him suddenly becomes more explicit, which makes it feel tied to his powers rather than who he actually is. At times her behavior crosses into manipulation. Then there's her role in Team Flash. Iris joins the team without any clear skill set or purpose, which is already pretty questionable. But the bigger issue is that she becomes the team leader without really earning it. Characters like Cisco, Caitlyn, or even Ralph contribute far more, yet Iris is positioned as essential. In fact, Barry arguably has more natural chemistry with Ralph than he ever does with Iris. The lightning rod idea perfectly sums up the problem. The show treats Iris as Barry's emotional anchor, but in reality she's just a liability, an easy target for villains, and a constant pressure point used to manipulate Barry. So why defend Iris at all? Because despite all of this, Barry genuinely loves her, and that's what matters. His love for her is as consistent across the entire series, and the consistency is key difference between Iris and every other love interest. With characters like Patty, the issue was never secrecy or timing. The real problem was that Barry wasn't emotionally available. No matter who enters his life, he's always going to go back to Iris. And that isn't bad luck, it's his defining character trait. You can argue that this is poor writing, and you wouldn't be wrong, but within the story itself, Barry isn't choosing Iris because she's perfect. He chooses her because she's his constant. He tries to convince himself that he can love someone else, but deep down he knows he won't. Most of Iris's flaws ultimately come down to bad writing and overexposure. Her character mirrors the Reverse Flash in a lot of ways, and they're both fundamentally strong characters, which is shown throughout the comics. But the more they're forced into the story without proper development, the more their impact weakens and strips away what already made a compelling story in the first. Patty Spivot is arguably the most beloved of Barry's love interests. and that's impressive considering she only appeared for half a season. In that short time, she proved to be a genuinely strong character, and in many ways, the most naturally compatible partner Barry ever had. What made Patty work is she and Barry were on the same wavelength without being carbon copies of each other. Yes, they were both CSI experts, both interested in metahumans, and both had awkward energy, but differences are what made the relationship compelling. Barry tends to make more emotional, impulsive decisions, while Patty is far more logical and grounded. I felt that this contrast could create a long-term tension and growth, because even if they're very similar on the outside, they have very different internal personalities. You can easily imagine entire storylines built around their dynamic. There's also the fact that Patty being Barry's permanent love interest would have shifted the focus back to Barry Allen, not just Flash. Because they shared the same profession, the show could have leaned more into Barry's forensic intelligence that we barely get to see, which is overshadowed by him being a speedster. With Patty, Barry's identity as a brilliant CSI expert would have felt just as important as his actual powers. Unlike Iris, Patty also had a clear and justified reason to be involved in Team Flash. Her father was murdered by a metahuman, which directly motivated her to join the anti-metahuman task force. She wasn't there because of proximity to Barry. She was there because of her purpose. She had the skills, the drive, and the emotional investment to earn a leadership role over time rather than just being handed one over. Their relationship itself was refreshingly natural. Patty opened and showed interest in Barry, and their chemistry felt easy and mutual. In some ways it mirrors Barry's dynamic with Felicity Smoak, but Patty's connection to Barry felt more grounded and it wasn't as idealized because in the end we all know that Felicity Smoak would not last with Barry, especially since she's the main love interest in Arrow. What I'm saying is Patty and Barry could have realistically lasted a long time. The strongest argument for Patty though is her narrative potential. She had a clear arc, she had trauma, motivation, and conflict, and even healing in the future. Her father's death pushed her to fight metahumans out of revenge, but over time she could have evolved and worked alongside people like Caitlyn and Cecile, learning to separate justice from anger and getting a new purpose and learning to love metahumans with Barry. Her exit from the show is ultimately very tragic because it didn't really come from incompatibility or betrayal at all. All Patty wanted was honesty. She was willing to stay. She was willing to fight. If Barry had trusted her enough to tell her the truth, then she definitely would have stayed. In the end, she didn't lose Barry because she wasn't right for him. She lost him because he was already in love with someone else. I do have to add on that much of her exit from the show is also related to what happened on set, but I'm not really very knowledgeable about that. Now, it's time for Barry and Supergirl. This would never be an endgame relationship, at most a short story arc. What makes Barry and Kara so compelling is that they're both true equals. Both are absurdly powerful, both carry the weight of being symbols for their cities, and they both understand the isolation that comes with being a hero. That's something Barry never really has with Iris. No matter how much the show tries to paper over the imbalance with lines like "We are the Flash," Iris will never understand Barry's experience in a way that Kara would be able to. Barry and Kara share a bond that only people like them can share. Being a hero isn't just a job, it's a mindset. And they both relate through the shared responsibility and the amount of sacrifice that they've had to overcome. Their conversations would feel different from Barry's conversations with anyone else. It would be more lighter, it would be playful, and more honest, diving into what it means to be a hero and what comes with being a hero. There's a reason people still talk about this banter. They have some of the best lines in the show. Stuff that I can't even say. I wanted to, but I physically cannot make myself say this. It sounds so cringe on paper, but they work. They make the clips good. This is definitely interesting. Is Barry and Felicity. One of the main reasons Barry and Felicity work so well is because they're both nerds. Their interactions feel like two people who are genuinely excited to be around each other, but are also like very awkward, nervous. Barry and Felicity geek out over the same things. They solve problems together and communicate very naturally. There's no power imbalance like you would see with Iris and Barry, and there's no forced drama either, but we really haven't gotten to see that. So they're just really two people who get each other, and in the episodes that they share, their dynamic is very warm and playful, and it never feels like the show is really trying too hard to sell it. You can tell that they're both aware of it too. They acknowledge that they're falling for people that they can't have, and that self-awareness adds some maturity to their dynamic and makes it very interesting and a bit tragic. There's also something important about Felicity's position in the story. She doesn't need to be a part of Team Flash, and if we were gonna think about it realistically, her life exists outside of Central City. Barry and Felicity were never meant to be in Endgame, and that's part of why they work so well together. And sometimes the relationships that don't last are the ones that show us the clearest version of who a character could. I think if they expanded on this anymore, then it could have had a very messy dynamic between Barry and Oliver, which I really would have personally disliked very much. But I feel like it's definitely something that the CW would do. Alright, so now this is what we've been waiting for. The real deal. The top picks. Ralph. Alright, hear me out. You see, this man is a top tier pick because he has infinite potential. Think about it. Like, if he really wanted to, he's a combination pick, an all-in-one. Like, have you heard the phrase, a jack of all trades is a master of none, though oftentimes better than a master of one? Like, you can't go wrong with him. He's hilarious, and he has good chemistry with Barry. A good example is that one episode where they crashed the party. I completely forgot the name of the episode, but I'm sure you know what we're talking about. So, overall, I'm just saying, combo pick. You can't go wrong with it. Next pick, Gideon. No. I don't really have much to say about Gideon, but you gotta think about it. Like, she's still better than Iris. Like, at some point in the story, she was the core part of the plot. Now, this is our last pick, but definitely one of my favorites. HR, Harrison Wells. I wouldn't be surprised if he is a female in some multiverse. And I would be even less surprised if the actor for that character is Tom Cavanaugh. Honestly, I would prefer for him to be the actor. No comment.